The Office is one of my favorite TV shows. In fact, I was a huge fan of it right when it began. I loved the show before it was cool to love The Office. Way back in '05, I was praising it, even when barely anybody knew about it. But little did I know that the bigger the show got, cracks began to appear in the Office empire. What was once one of the funniest, relatable, and down-to-earth TV shows was now ruined by bad writing and trying too hard to be trendy. So to me, The Office started falling apart in season 6, and there's many reasons for that. Now looking back, seasons 1 through 5 were the golden years of The Office, where all the characters were at their peak, and things felt consistent with what made The Office stand out as a TV show. So, season 6 and 7 are still entertaining, and the episodes have their moments. But the main problems, beginning with season 6, is that they made us hate Pam and Jim. And eventually, they made us hate Dwight a little bit in season 7. And we'll get to Dwight later. I love Dwight Schrute. I think he's become my favorite character. So first, let's talk about Pam. Season 6 is really when they made us start to hate Pam. The kind of damage they did to this character, I love Pam in the early seasons. But in season 5, Pam started to become cringy at times, which isn't funny. It's annoying. Yeah, she was a little bit cringy, even in the early seasons, but they went way too far with it. So in season 6, is really when Pam becomes a smug and snotty girl. They had that stupid episode where Pam writes the note complaining about the mess in the microwave, and other weird moments like that. She went from being innocent and kind to cocky and rude. Now, as the show progressed, they gave Pam's character a lot of growth. They made her break out of her shell, and she began standing up for herself. And they made her overcome being shy. And all that stuff was really relatable and very inspiring. But in the process of her journey, by the time she felt whole as a person, she forgot how to treat people and became the obnoxious, overcritical, beautiful woman. The writers thought it was cute, but it wasn't. And they sacrificed Pam's integrity as a kind person for cheap jokes. They did so much character development with Pam, and I think too much. They did a lot with Pam, and it was fun at first, but then they started overthinking everything, and being overconfident in the way that they wrote the show. All they had to do was make her still be a nice character, while having her lose how shy and quiet she used to be, because now she's moved past that kind of person. But the problem is that even though we got to see Pam grow past her being shy, and it was inspiring, but now she's overly bubbly and way too giddy of a person, which is funny when Andy does that, and when Michael does it, for instance. But it's not humorous or funny when Pam does it, because there isn't any humor behind it. Her feeling confident is one thing, but being overconfident makes her come across like a snobby bitch, which is not how we viewed her character in the early seasons. This is not the same character we fell in love with in the early episodes. This Pam is an imposter. The most egregious thing they did to her character and a story arc I despised, and maybe the worst ever in The Office, is when they started having Michael date Pam's mother. Pam had a very nasty and cold reaction to it, and scolded Michael and wanted him to feel like he was doing something wrong to her. It was embarrassing, and there was no reasonable reason why she should have treated Michael like that. It's a problem that people act like that in society. People act like just because something gives you the ick or makes you cringe, then that's supposed to mean it's wrong. And just because you think something is gross, that does not automatically justify your complaint about why something is wrong. There has to be an actual reason behind it. It's women in their 30s and 40s reacting to things like they're a stupid teenage girl who doesn't have the proper ethics as a person, and it's embarrassing as hell. This story arc was too uncomfortable. And yes, they always had arcs or stuff in the office that was uncomfortable, like Michael and Jan's dinner party, or all the meeting scenes, but that stuff was funny. Michael dating Pam's mom wasn't funny, and maybe it could have been, but the way they presented it wasn't funny. And the worst of all is that they even had Pam slap Michael in the face in front of the office, as if Michael should be ashamed of himself or something. It was terrible. She slaps Michael, yet Michael was the same person who was the only one who showed up to Pam's art gallery, and the only person there who complimented her painting of the office building, and even told her that he was proud of her. And also, Pam was the only one that left Dunder Mifflin to work for the Michael Scott Paper Company, when everyone else did not care less. These two characters complimented each other, and after everything Michael did for her, she slaps him in the face. Michael even promoted her to sales after the Michael Scott Paper Company went under. Michael and Jim are the only two characters that ever believed in her, and yet Jim just stands there and doesn't tell Pam to stop it and that it's wrong or anything. I mean, after she slapped him, Jim said to her, "I told you you were going to regret it." And Pam says, "I know." But that's too weak. Jim should have stopped her before and defended Michael. But Jim was not being a bro to Michael, which is a problem to me, because in the early seasons, Jim and Michael became friends and would help each other by giving each other advice. But now, Jim's changed. So let's talk about Jim, the next ruined character. They made us hate Jim in Season 6. What the hell happened to Jimbo? He was always a little smug in the early seasons, but his smugness grew over time, so much so that he thought he could do a better job as manager than Michael. I guess he learned nothing from Ryan's attempts to do so. I guess Jim was too distracted from Pam and Karen at the time. But anyway, I must admit, it was pretty interesting to see Michael and Jim butt heads, and some of it was entertaining. But the problem is that we grew to really like Jim as a character. They were trying to recreate the Ryan taking over Dunder Mifflin storyline from the earlier seasons by replacing Ryan with Jim. But Ryan's character was always the you love to hate him character, which is what made him appealing to a degree. But here, all of Jim's kind and down-to-earth qualities are thrown down the drain in favor of drama. The sacrifice was not worth it, because in the end, Jim returning back to sales and stepping down as co-manager, Jim's character was now damaged, and it made us feel as fans viewed Jim differently now as a person, and that sucked. The biggest thing that hurt Jim's character was the episode Koi Pond, where Jim purposefully leans away and doesn't catch Michael, and Michael falls right into the koi pond. The episode as a whole is entertaining, and it's a fairly fun episode, but the problem is how Jim and Michael make up at the end. Jim did apologize to Michael, but it was too quick of an apology, and it wasn't filled with the kind of emotion that it should have had. This was a major betrayal. This new version of Jim doesn't really come across as Michael's friend anymore, and more of a snotty businessman moving up the ladder and trying to not let anyone stand in his way. And Jim never felt that way in the past. Remember how much he butted heads with Charles in Season 5? Well, now he's become Charles. I mean, not quite, but still. Because I always thought that Jim was similar to Michael. That Michael was openly silly, but Jim was inwardly silly. So, looking at the classic episodes, like when Jim created the Office Olympics, when he and the others were supposed to be working, that's like something that Michael would do, with all the silly meetings he would create. But now in Season 6, Jim says to Michael that we should stop having quote-unquote useless meetings, and that the company time is better used to be more productive in the office. This is not something that Jim would say. It's all off. In Jim's desperation to make more money for himself and Pam's future, he sacrificed the joy and silliness that made him feel happy and what made us as an audience view him as a charming character. Jim's apology to Michael for letting him fall into the koi pond should have been better, and we really could have had a very emotional scene between two guys that used to always have each other's backs in the past. Now the difference is that Michael stunted people from becoming more successful in the office because that's a side of Michael that's emotional and is afraid to let go of things. He only did those things because Michael doesn't like change. He wasn't purposefully trying to hold people back. But Jim was. He let Michael fall into the pond, so that it made himself look good at the meeting. I just thought that Jim would have learned from Michael's good-hearted nature by the time in this show, and realize why Michael is the way he is. Instead, he acts like he's still confused by Michael. It's strange. So after Jim apologizes to Michael, Michael now thinks to himself that he let him fall in the pond because he was jealous of him, which is not exactly true. The real reason is worse. Jim grew to hate Michael, and letting him fall into the pond is his way of getting revenge on him. But not out of jealousy, but resentment. But because Michael thinks this, he ends up forgiving Jim by blowing it off as a joke. The writers completely ruined an emotional scene that could have had Jim fully realize why he was wrong, and would have had Michael eventually forgive him 2 or 3 episodes later. But they decided to quickly end the issue by the end of the episode. It was lazy and shitty. So moving on, there was also a great ending to one of the episodes where Dwight and Ryan decided to team up to destroy Jim. A very pleasing and entertaining concept, which could have led to some great episodes, where they both tried ideas and failed, and Michael could have somehow found out, and it could have been really great. But, you guessed it, they ruined it by having Dunder Mifflin be bought by Sabre, and Joe came in, and Jim eventually wanted to return to sales, thus ending his tenure as boss. This still could have happened eventually, but we didn't get to see Dwight and Ryan come up with these awesome, funny plots to destroy Jim's position, which could have been really fun. But the alliance between Dwight and Ryan only lasted 2 episodes, so it was ruined. God damn it. Maybe the writers felt like they had to end certain things because they knew that Steve Carell's contract was up by the end of season 7, so they felt like they had to rush a lot of stuff. But that's not really how you write good television shows. So now we have to talk about Dwight. Was his character ruined? Well, yes, a little bit. Dwight also changed how he felt about Michael down the road, and was now feeling resentment against Michael. Meanwhile, in the old seasons, Michael was Dwight's hero, and I think it's because he saw something in Michael that he wished he could achieve, and that was to be a manager. There was so many great bonding episodes Michael and Dwight had together in the early seasons. All of their adventures. It was really fun and really great. And it reminded you of how you got to have those same experiences with the friends you have in real life. It was great, relatable television. But they ruined that by ending their adventures together and made it all about office drama, which was there in the classic episodes too, but in the past it was balanced by fun escapades. For example, there's a classic episode where Dwight goes behind Michael's back and goes to IHOP with Jan and tries to steal Michael's job from him, which is one of the best episodes of the series. But in the end, Michael forgives Dwight because he realizes that Dwight was just trying to move up the corporate ladder. So he just did it about the wrong way. And Dwight realizes that was wrong to go that far to hurt his best friend. But in season 7, Dwight doesn't seem to give a shit about that stuff anymore. And that's sad. It sucked to see things change so much between Michael and Dwight, for no good reason. Now, going back in time, Dwight was always a kiss-ass to Michael, because Dwight loves authority, and he wish he could have what Michael has. And Michael loves attention. So something worked in their relationship. And even though Dwight's intention was just to be a suck-up to Michael to get ahead in business, but along the journey of being a suck-up, Dwight realized how much in common he has with Michael, and the two of them became friends, and made each other laugh, and would team up against danger, like escaping a car after Michael drives it into a lake, and etc. They bonded, and the relationship stopped becoming about being a fake kiss-ass, but about being an actual admirer of Michael as a person. But for some reason, the writers ruined Michael and Dwight's friendship in Season 7, just for drama. You see the pattern here? The drama in The Office comes from the stuff that happens to the characters, like the branch almost closing down, or having to defeat the overbearing Charles Minor. It doesn't come from the actual characters themselves. It doesn't come from ruining the characters or the build-up of their relationships with one another. The Office became too big for its britches. The writers sacrificed the characters to try to make bigger drama for the show. But it doesn't work, because they were ruining what made us fall in love with the characters in the first place. And this is mainly the reason why The Office eventually fell apart. They could have ended the show by Season 10 if they gave the fans good reasons to still be invested in the show, like in the past, but they lost their way. Instead, much of the writing of the show in Seasons 8 and 9 was altered and seemed to be like stuff that you would see in inferior TV shows like 30 Rock and Parks and Recreation. But the problem is that The Office was a pioneer of this style of comedy, and it was the gold standard. The Office was not supposed to be like those shows. It was those shows that are trying to be like The Office, but they got it reversed. Yes, Season 8 and 9 were entertaining, but it was also quite bad at times, and not great like it used to be, for the most part. I also hated how they made Andy and Erin break up. They were one of my favorite couples in the show, and they killed it. It felt like the new Jim and Pam. They slowly built their relationship up and made you feel that emotion behind it. And it was relatable. But unlike Jim and Pam, they frickin' ended it. What a waste. It just didn't make sense. Also, Andy was a great idea to have as a boss who replaces Michael Scott. But they made Andy too mean, and he just wasn't funny in an awkward way anymore. Instead, the writers thought it was funny to make Andy look as pathetic as possible. And that's not funny, because there is no payoff in the end. So anyway, this is how I feel about what happened to The Office. Much like the paper business, it was ruined by bad decisions. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and please hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my uploads. Thank you so much for watching. My name is SuperPat98, and I'll see you all again next time.